हाँ नहीं है। लाइन पे अच्छा ये अवधेश फाइनली ट्रेन ठीक है। जब जब हाँ जब जैसे स्पीकर बोलेगा जैसे बिरवानी की बोलेंगे तो कैसा होता है जी। हेलो तो बढ़िया just 2 minutes give for 5 minutes or so you can meanwhile start your informal I'm here of this जरा जी दूसरा ऑडियो को बोल मेरी मूवमेंट मैंने पीछे से पीछे से आगे सेंटर में था हाँ वो बोल रहा है बस मेरी फ्लैश रहेगी खास बड़ी बढ़िया चलाएंगे तो मैनेज करना है खराब ना कर दे पूरा पावर केबल सुन लगी ना शीशा से अपना पावर अपने मुंह निकाल दे अरे किसी कलर का केबल वहां लगा हुआ है
कौन सा क्या क्या केबल का
हमिंग आ रही है
अच्छा
ये कलर नहीं समझ में आ रहा क्या फ्रीक्वेंसी केवल दे लो बहुत इंटरनेट के बता रही है प्रेस करके इंटरनेट की बता रही है हाइट में लोगे हमारा डालो दूसरा नहीं पहुंचा है नहीं
What is the format? We have to give price each like this or what?
And if there are some minutes, there will always be a few minutes remaining. So the follow-up questions, I'll ask follow-up questions after that.
So, just trying to understand.
Yeah.
If there is a structure and other thing, then
Yeah.
that's
I mean, you'll have your chance to give your speech and your opening comments, and then that's why they've given you 10 minutes. So for those remaining 3-4 minutes, there'll be some follow-ups. Hello?
question on the format becomes a better thing. More interactive. First, shooter.
क्या बताइए आप? बताइए क्या पूछ रहे हो?
देंगे तो
क्या
लेट हो रहा है तो शुरू कर दो
नहीं वैसे नहीं करता हेलो हेलो हेलो
यस
हेलो
हेलो
Doing that we have it, I just maybe I चला मिल जाएगा
अब आ गया होगा
ये सब कॉलेज सब उदय गूगल वो धीरेन्द्र सिन्हा का नंबर देना देना दोबारा कौन सा है ये कौन सा वाला है सेट कर लो दूसरा भी है हेलो भाई हाँ कौन सा केबल लगाया 96250 येलो हाँ येलो कौन सा येलो ना
Uday, what time we go live?
Just another. Actually, one of our the one who's going to be supervising the program from here, he's just reaching 2 minutes. I want him to be here. Right now, I'm supervising, so then I'll not have contact with them. So I just want him to be here, just for safety.
सब कुछ किया सर मैंने ऑफिस में सबसे बात करी सबने कहा सब कुछ वहाँ पे ओके कहीं कोई प्रॉब्लम नहीं
सुनो तुम उससे वो प्रिंट कटवा लो शेयर में चेक करो श्यामवन कटवाओ नहीं तुम यहाँ से काट वो अपना चाहते आगे चेक करो
भाई जना बोल रहा
जी जी you will be put on the virtual mode sir you will come on the screen अभी आ जाएगा सर अभी मैं बता रहा हूँ आपको ले लेंगे आपने लॉगिन कर लिया
मैं सबका ऑडियो टेस्ट करवा रहा हूँ आप वीडियो टेस्ट करवा दिया सबका ऑडियो टेस्ट
check on the screen yes
Hello, check. Hello, check. Hello, check. Check. Jitendra. Hello.
डेलीगेट से पैनलिस्ट
मेन रोड पे राइट साइड में यहाँ पर वहाँ से आना
हाँ सर मजबूत में है ना
इससे बात करा दो
लगा
वेबिनार
लगा
20 seconds using this 19 है इसमें one is this is one and then balance 19
अंदर आ जा
इसमें एक बॉक्स में वो भी आ रहा है छोड़ दे भी आ रहा है
जितना आ रहा है उतना रिकॉर्ड मत अरे तो बाहर से
अरे इसको भेज देते
यहाँ तो बहुत प्रोग्राम चैनल पढ़ना because we have Every quarter that can be appointed.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon.
Hello. Hello. Check 1, 2, 3, 4.
Hello. Just testing. Good afternoon. This is testing.
Hello, check. Hello, check.
Closer. Okay. Testing.
Hello. Check. Yeah. Okay. They won't check their connections. Mr. Multani, if you can just say something, please.
Yeah. Good evening to everyone. Look forward to a wonderful program. Thank you.
Perfect. Dr. Virwani, if you can just say something.
Yes. Hello. Testing. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Perfect. Dr. Charan Singh.
Hi. Testing. 1, 2, 3, 4. Testing. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Perfect. And Mr. Khanna? Oh, he's not. Okay. You can mute yourself. Thank you.
अभी कर देते हैं यार उससे बात हो। हाँ जी प्रेसिडेंट साहब।
नमस्कार सर, perfect.
हाँ जी अरविंद, हेलो।
Yeah. Hello.
Kanna ji, good evening. Welcome, sir.
जी good evening जी। Arvind, we are family friends, so I thought I must attend this program.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
आए नहीं अभी? President साहब, good evening. Hello. President Sanjay is good evening.
Sir, namaskar sir. Ashok Khanna ji, really a
हाँ
pleasure.
जी। Good evening जी।
Excellent sir. And very good to have one of our senior most residents here on the program.
अरे Arvind and I are family friends for many years in childhood.
That's a double advantage.
क्या उसने भी मुझे कहा ना ये शो करना। हाँ जी, नहीं उनको तो आपकी आ रही है।
Hello, 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 hello. Check, check. Hello, 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 hello. Hello, hello, hello. Check, check. Hello, hello. Check, check. Hello, 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 hello. Hello, 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 hello. Audio test. Hello, hello. Hello, 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 hello. 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 नहीं, why are you patching my audio through this? इनको बात करनी होगी. नहीं. No. I'm not going to be communicating with PCR. कलेक्टर ठीक है? क्या करना है? अड्डे जी, काम करो. अंडे जी, बाबा ने 5,000 किया, ठीक है? देख मैं इस तरह मारते गया. Yeah. So just call me and give me a cue. One second. Pandey ji, are you ready? Ready? Audio problem? Just 1 second. They just finalizing one.
Arvind? Arvind?
Yes.
I'm Ashok Khanna from.
No.
Hello, Ashok Khanna from Chandigarh.
Yeah, I know. We've said hello. We are now starting, I think. I hope.
Start. Please start.
Hello. You're able to hear me? Hello. Perfect. You're able to hear me. उनको वहां आवाज मिल रही है पीसीआर में. हेलो मिस्टर पांडे. क्या ठीक है? सर एक मिनट. हेलो. या सुधा. Okay. Hello. Okay, this is a program on the shadow budget 2021-2022, organized by PhD Chamber of Commerce in partnership with eGrow and being telecast live on NewsX. It's Friday 15th of January 2021. Okay. We're 2 weeks away from the union budget of 2021-22. Okay. 1 second, let me just put a long test out.
Testing 1, 2, 3, 4. Checking 1, 2, 3, 4. Sanjay Agarwal. Is that okay? Sanjay Agarwal, testing 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Now I'm speaking. That was Dr. Agarwal. Now, as that was Shri Sanjay Agarwal.
Yeah, no.
Now, not as yet. Okay. And you're getting the final speech. So the video is perfect. So just finalize the audio and Pradeep ji, एक बार आपने मिल लीजिए. Audio. Video is fine. Audio ले लीजिए.
Check.
हेलो 1 2 3 4 हेलो अब देखो हेलो 1 2 3 4 हेलो एंकर का बुलवाइए
Hello. Hello. Subset? Okay. Sorry. Just going to request you all to do. This is the final audio check, please.
Hello.
Because we've already done it twice.
Yeah.
Just say something.
Hello. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hello.
Yeah. Okay, bolte jana, ताकि everyone can switch.
Hello. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hello. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Hello, 1, 2, 3. Testing.
Hello.
Hello, check. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hello, check.
You see, this is the when there's a live telecast, then everything has to be perfect. The recording is still that scope of error because then they can stop the recording. You can't stop the live one. This used to be a weekly occurrence, and now it's become such a regular forgotten. Hello. Yeah. Hello. They have to be that service waiting. You see, thanks to Zoom, it became so easy because there is no complication at all. Audio, video, cables, Zoom. So you've got everyone in the frame. So even our TV channels, we used to have big debates, all thanks to Zoom. And it became so much easier. There was no OB bands, now 5 OB bands, 10 OB bands, live units which are going to be possessed. Everyone is going through Zoom. And there was one server and it was going Hello. लगातार बोलते रहो. ठीक. Hello, test. Yeah, exactly. Hello. Hello, check. Hello, check. Test, hello, mic test, check, hello, testing. Mic testing, hello. Hello. Sorry, my phone was on silent. Yeah, tell me. Okay. Perfect. Hello, hello, hello. Hello, hello, hello. Yeah, I can. Hello, hello, hello. Okay. Oh, great. So just test this once finally with them, and then you call me back. Yeah. Okay. I'm hanging up. Just check it once with Jenna. I'll keep on speaking. Hello. Test. Hello. It seems that they've got the audio finally. Okay. Okay, it seems that, yeah, it's good. Okay, let me call up. मैं call कर रहा हूं उनको. Yeah, Siddharth, you good to go? Okay, perfect. जेना, आपका या प्रमोद जी का? रोलिंग बता देना. 5-4 काउंट आउट. 3. Hello and welcome. I'm Uday Pratap Singh. You're joining us on this special broadcast right here on NewsX. Yes, we're coming live from this very special event that is taking place in the national capital in the run-up to the union budget of 2021, which of course is a much-awaited budget after this absolutely unprecedented year for India and the entire world, particularly economically. Yes, today we're speaking to you live from PhD Chamber of Commerce India and IGRO's Shadow Budget 2021-2022, a special program which is happening as the new normal is, both physically and virtually. So yes, we of course have physical speakers right here with us live at the PhD Chamber House in the National Capital. And of course, we do have some very eminent speakers virtually as well. This is being telecast on NewsX to our audiences. We, of course, will be building up to the Union Budget of 2021 because, as I said, it's a much-awaited budget. All eyes, of course, on the Finance Minister, on what Nirmala Sitharaman will be presenting in the Parliament on the 1st of February. Because remember, the government, the RBI, has announced stimulus measures last year. There was a financial stimulus package, multiple rounds, in fact, of stimulus packages announced by the government. There were, of course, certain measures announced by the RBI governor as well. But now, this is a more full-fledged budget. You see, certain sectors only were touched by the government so far last year. There were, of course, some reforms as well. The government said it's time to create opportunity even in adversity, which is why there were reforms, particularly in the coal sector, in the space sector, and many other disinvestment plans were also announced. Will those lead to fruition this year ahead? Which are going to be the thrust areas of the budget of 2021-2022? Will it be agriculture which will dominate due to the current farm laws issue? Will it be the manufacturing sector and other sectors which perhaps could benefit due to this anti-China sentiment world over? Or will it be a more holistic budget, taking into account that certain sectors have been hit by the pandemic, but remember, no stimulus yet has been announced for them. No help has been given yet to them last year. So, as I said, it's a power-packed panel today, which PhD CCI and IGRO have put together in a joint effort in partnership. Let me quickly introduce our panelists who you'll be hearing from in the course of the next 1.5 hours to 2 hours on NewsX. We have Shri Sanjay Agarwal ji with us. Shri Sanjay Agarwal is the president of PhD Chamber of Commerce and Industry and chairman and CEO of Paramount Cables Group. He has been the recipient of numerous prestigious awards in the corporate sector over the past 34 years. We also have with us Shri Pradeep Multani ji, Shri Pradeep Multani is the Senior Vice President of PhD Chamber of Commerce and Industry and Chairman of Multani Pharmaceuticals Limited. He has more than 40 years of experience in the field of Ayurvedic and Unani medicine sector. We also have with us Dr. Arvind Virmani. Dr. Virmani is a renowned economist and chairman of IGRO. He has been an advisor to the Indian government at the highest levels for 25 years, including as Chief Economic Advisor, Ministry of Finance, as well as Principal Advisor, Planning Commission of India. It's great to have you, Dr. Virmani, on the broadcast with us. Dr. Charan Singh is also with us live. Dr. Charan Singh ji is a renowned economist and chief executive at IGRO. He was a full-time visiting faculty and former RBI chair professor during 2012 to 2016 at the Indian Institute of Management, Bangalore, one of the most prestigious institutes, of course, teaching management, teaching commerce in the country today. Shri Sandeep Agarwal is also with us live. Shri Sandeep Agarwal is the chairman of Industry Affairs Committee of PhD CCI and managing director and promoter of Paramount Communications Limited. He has received numerous awards from social, cultural, and industry organizations over the past 3 decades. Dr. Ashok Vishandas is also live with us today at our venue in the national capital. Dr. Vishandas is director at IGRO and former chairman of CACP, that's Commission for Agricultural Costs and Prices, Ministry of Agriculture and Farmers Welfare, Government of India, and also chief technical advisor at Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations. Dr. Ratan Chand is also with us. Dr. Chand is director at IGRO and has served Government of India at various positions for more than 35 years, including former chief director at Monitoring and Evaluation, Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, Government of India. Colonel MP Singh is also with us. Colonel MP Singh is a defense analyst. He's published a number of articles in several leading journals and websites on strategic issues. He has served in the Indian Army in the Elite Infantry Regiment for 30 years. Shri Saurabh Sanyal is also with us today. Shri Sanyal is Secretary General of PhD Chamber of Commerce and Industry. He has over 39 years of diversified and diverse experience in armed forces, Corps of Engineers, as well as the corporate sector. So without further ado, and I don't want to spend more time. These days, a lot of anchors love the sound of their own voices, but I promise to let our panelists do more of the talking. And I will, of course, steer the conversation in the right direction. We'll keep taking questions as well, so we'll keep it as interactive as possible. But without further ado, I want to hand the floor over to Shri Sanjay. But before I do that, we do have some audience members here. And for those watching, let's have a big round of applause for the team at PhD CCI and IGRO for putting this together. You know, it's the signs of the new normal, slowly getting back to the India that we knew before the COVID. And that's why kudos to them for organizing this today. Let's go straight across, as I said now, to Shri Sanjay Agarwal, President, PhD CCI. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Uday Pratap. It's really a privilege and a pleasure for me to welcome you all to this program. New normal, it's become such a hackneyed word, but yes, in this new normal, we had become accustomed to only virtual meetings, but at least now we have felt confident enough to hold a program which is live in person. Of course, it's a hybrid program, and that's what it's going to be for a good time to come now. Very happy to have this interaction with such eminent panel. Let me just begin the proceedings by discussing the current economic scenario, as we all are seeing that the green shoots have started appearing. Our PhD chamber has introduced various indices over this period to estimate where the economy is moving. And the most, I would say, the prompt estimate that we get is by the 3rd of the succeeding month, in which we try to have a very, very, fast picture of what has happened, or very rapid picture. We call this index the GPS index, and this does give you a GPS bearings in a way on the economy. What we are tracking is 3 elements, just 3 elements: the GST collection numbers, the passenger vehicle sales numbers, and the movement of Sensex. The 3 combined together in weighted, in weighted averages into an index. What we are trying to guess is the forward movement of the, what happened during the previous month, both in terms of what has actually happened in terms of tax collection, or in terms of consumer sentiment by way of passenger vehicle sale, or the sentiment going forward in view of the behavior of the Sensex. When we look at this index, we have tried to, index, compare these numbers for over the last more than 30 months per year, right since when GST was introduced. And what we are finding is that the GPS index, we found the GPS index for the month of December to be at a level of 124 compared to 109 that we had in December 19. So that is a very good indicator of where the economy is moving. Then you go to a more complex indicator, like we have devised an index called the Economic and Business Momentum Index, which is a complex of 25 various indicators. And when we combine these 25 indicators and we arrive at our index numbers, what we see again is that in December 20, we had a level of 96 October 19, October 20 was 96.7 versus October 19 of 97.1, almost there. So when you look at a complete composite of 25 indices in which you have got the industrial, index of industrial production, consumer price, inflation, railway freight movements, a wide variety of, indicators, then again we see that the economy has started to move in the positive direction. The estimates that we have now, our PBM index, what we are predicting now is 7.7% reduction in the GDP for the year 2021. But something similar, around 7.7 or 7.8% again, is the growth that we expect in this coming year of 21-22. Effectively, what it means is that if we were a student, we have had 2 years of hiatus, we have had 2 years of layover. Our economy at the end of March 22 would end up being somewhere near where we were at the end of March 20. So a lot needs to be done to cover up this 2 years of of loss that we have incurred in our growth, because 2 years of growth momentum is by itself a huge number. And we, like any other country in the world, like the most advanced and the richest countries, right down to the poorest countries in the world, all of us need to work very hard to recover the lost ground and to try and be where we have been planning to be. Coming to what the country needs to do, I think there are hundreds of things that the government needs to do. Hundreds of things would be advised to the government, and hundreds of experts would be coming out with their own recommendations. From the PSD chamber, we try to look at what is the expectation, majorly of the trade and industry. And from that perspective, if I give the first part of my recommendations, and then we'll move on to the other recommendations also. The basic requirement of the economy today is to sustain and to increase and to strengthen the demand in the economy. And that demand is what has suffered the most because of the pandemic, because of the economy having slowed down, because the economy having had to suffer all these closures all through this period. Now, what is the way to recover this lost momentum? What is the way to recover the economic losses? I think there are two methods. One is clearly to spend, which is the typical Keynesian economics, and that is being done to quite an extent. Many countries have been very aggressive. Countries like UK and US have gone into trillions of dollars of expenditure on this account, and probably that's going to help their economies. Other countries are a bit more conservative in their approach, and I think they also have their reasons. Our country, India, has been a bit conservative on this front till now, but I think now the time has come when the worst is behind us, and when we are actually looking at the normal trade and normal business and the normal life resuming, to be now out with the maximum level of stimulus and incentives to the highest level. We have had some excellent stimulus measures by the government of India during this period. We have had 3 versions of Atmanirbhar Bharat, 1, 2, and 3. All of them have addressed various issues. But one major issue that has been addressed by all these 3 has been the supply side in terms of supporting the MSMEs and various stress sectors that has been there. Now what we need to look at is demand. That is going to be the most crucial aspect. So one way is for the government to not really be overly concerned about budget deficits, and to come out and spend, to be very proactive on direct benefit transfers to all segments, to make sure that the money is available to the common man and is there in the economy for the demand to start picking up. The other major thing that we need to do is the long-term building of infrastructure. I think the government was prescient in this manner. The finance minister had announced the National Infrastructure Pipeline project of 111 lakh crores in December 2019, just prior to the pandemic spreading out. So unfortunately, nothing much could be done in all of calendar 2020. But now, what we as an industry chamber look forward to is an absolute front loading of the investments into the national infrastructure pipeline. We have to be very proactive on this. The question is, where will the funds be found? Where will we find the money? The money, as I said, firstly, we should not be overly concerned about deficits. I think there is a consensus building up among various economists that at least I listen to, that deficit should not be that major a concern across the world. Across the spectrum, economies are not looking at the deficit. They are going ahead and spending where the demand needs to be revived. But at the same time, a major demand and the major asset that we need to create for the long term is by building our infrastructure. And for building the infrastructure, we need the money. And for that, our recommendation is as follows. India as an economy, if you look at the top G20, the top 20 economies in the world, we are at rank 7 when you look at our debt to GDP ratio. Our debt to GDP ratio is 127% compared to some of the much larger and advanced economies, which include UK, France, US, Korea. All these are in the region of 250% plus approximately, and Japan reaches up to 400%. Even China is at around 250%. That shows us that there is a huge amount of space available for us to raise funds, to raise debt, and to spend that money into the infrastructure, build up the infrastructure, which is going to stand us in good state for a very long period. That is the first argument. Second is that our foreign exchange reserves are very comfortable. We are at nearly $600 billion now of foreign exchange reserves. That also provides a lot of comfort. Having looked at all this, what is required now is that how to then raise the funds. The best alternative today seems to be from our chamber side, which we are very strongly recommending to the government, is to create or encourage one or more mega development financial institutions. These mega DFIs, we used to have 3 DFIs in the past. These were ICICI, IDBI, and IFCI. They did their part in the earlier part of the 80s, 70s and 80s and all. Thereafter, slowly they got all converted into banks. Today, what we need is a much bigger level of investment into a DFI, one or many, where we raise a large amount of funds. Now, what is the next aspect? One aspect that we need to consider is there is so much funds moving around in the world, lapping the shores, international shores, looking for returns. The net returns that most of the central banks across the world are offering are negligible. And there is so much money looking for returns. Now that money is usually finding its way into various speculative means. Even in India, we have a lot of money flowing into the stock markets, which is fueling up the stock markets, but it's not really doing much for the economy. What we need to do is we create these DFIs. We have all 3 options in the DFI. A, government, after keeping a golden share, can invite sovereign wealth funds and pension funds, etc., to invest into the equity of that mega DFI. Then that same mega DFI can raise a huge amount of money by floating both dollar bonds or foreign exchange bonds and rupee bonds, depending on the appetite of the investors. The money so raised, I think 20 lakh crores that we want to spend in the, per year, or 25 lakh crores that we need to spend per year. Even if a sincere effort is made, our feeling is that that much money could easily be raised by the government DFI, which would then initially invest into the government projects. there is a lot of government projects which are already a part of the national infrastructure pipeline. They have already announced they are not just on the drawing board. You have to find the money for that. Put in the money that will help revive demand. And once the demand gets revived and the economic engine starts chugging along on a comfortable footing, therein the private sector will also chip in with its projects. The states which would have better collections on GST and as the demand picks up, everybody would be able to pitch in, and all of these would further be financed by the same DFIs. What would happen is it will become a virtuous cycle, and in that virtuous cycle, what you are building is assets which are going to last us for a century, not just for 5 years or 10 years. So that is what we need to do. Then the other part is coming to the other aspects. This is the major recommendation of ours, the hard infrastructure. But then again, coming to the social infrastructure, the soft infrastructure, I think the national infrastructure plan is already accounting for something like 3.5 lakh crores, something 3.9 lakh crores, if I'm not wrong. Nearly 3.5% of the national infrastructure pipeline is towards the social infrastructure. But our feeling is that we need to spend much more on social infrastructure. Health. This pandemic has all been about health and health worries and the shortcomings that we have in our infrastructure on the health front. We need a huge amount of money to spend on the health infrastructure in many, many ways. The first thing that comes to mind is the huge shortage of doctors, nurses, paramedics. Why? We need to, the budget of 2020 on the recommendation, I think it was, we are very grateful that the government had accepted our recommendation in last year's budget when we said that every district hospital in the country should be converted into a medical college. That has luckily happened. So that announcement has come. We want implementation of that. But in addition, what we need to do is we need to greatly increase the number of medical seats, the number of nursing seats, the number of paramedical seats for education. We need to, our target is that we must double our medical professionals in the next 3 years and do a lot. We have to not just spend the money into creating the hard infrastructure for that, but also what we need to do is to make sure that the rules and regulations, which are proving to be a stranglehold, which are proving to be, a straitjacket rather, because of which there is a great restriction on the number of medical colleges or nursing colleges, etc., that can come up. We are seeing a large number of Indian students going to foreign countries to get medical education at a much cheaper cost, which should definitely not be the case. So we need to spend a huge amount on education of the medical manpower. Secondly, we need to spend a lot of money at all levels of medical infrastructure, which means primary healthcare centers. We need local hospitals. We need district hospitals. We need all the central hospitals to be fully equipped. We need to come out of this unfortunate situation where in the capital city of the country, we find that the doctors are not paid for months. We have to have a foolproof mechanism for delivery of funds for CapEx and OpEx both, which means that even for the running expenses, whether it's the salaries or the expenditure required for the health infrastructure, there should be no compromise.
Okay.
It should be done on a national level.
So health and of course, health emergency has shown why that infrastructure needs to be developed.
Absolutely.
Just a couple of minutes more, sir, and then you can.
Yeah. The other thing is education. Of course, I think the national education plan is pretty positive, and that has come about with a target of 3% of the GDP being spent on education, which we welcome. Our only suggestion on that is we have to make sure that we come up with skilled manpower. The stress should be more and more on skilling, which is the most important requirement. The one more other requirement that we think is very, very important is the need for contract enforcement and law and order. On ease of doing business, our country has made some very good strides. We have come up very substantially on the ease of doing business rankings. But one very major hesitation that foreign investors have for coming into our country is the contract enforcement period and even the law and order situation. Now, if we look at the situation, what is happening? We have crores of cases pending in our courts. High courts, more than 12 high courts have nearly more than 1/3 of the judges' positions vacant. I think the actual number is 37% of high court posts are vacant. Out of the more than 22,000 odd figures for the district judges and lower courts, I think again more than 22% of the posts are lying vacant. We need to fill up each of these. We have to have a foolproof system. You know, when somebody is retiring is not rocket science. Everybody knows when a judge is going to retire. Why can't you ensure that there is no position left vacant, and whenever a judge retires, you cover those posts, and then double the number of judges, double the number of police. Police is again a huge shortage. You spend money on paying the salaries, people get employment, and you get law and order. So this is the other very important part.
Well, some very important points, of course, listed out by the president of PhD CCI. He ended, of course, though, with the manpower issues. Remember, of course, in police, also in the judiciary, and also, of course, in healthcare, which need to be filled. We don't need to rely on interns to carry out important surgeries and important procedures if we establish medical colleges and if we, of course, concentrate on the medical sector in time. Very important points, of course, raised by the first speaker today. And remember, today is not just an opportunity for discussion and debate. It is actually an opportunity for our eminent panelists today to give forth their suggestions, because right now it's a time for ideation. The government, the RBI, the Ministry of Finance, and of course, the other relevant departments are finalizing the budget. And today we are presenting to you a shadow budget. We are presenting to you industry suggestions. We are presenting to you corporate India suggestions. We are presenting to you professors and economists' suggestion on what their dream budget would be, so that the powers that be, whom we hope are watching today, and of course also following on social media on NewsX, Twitter and newsx.com, are taking note of some of these very important suggestions. And of course, it promises to be a very holistic conversation. Sanjay Agarwal ji has given his suggestions. It's time now to go over to Pradeep Multani for his comments. Senior Vice President, PhD, CCI, is joining us virtually today. So Pradeep Multani ji, over to you, sir. Your suggestions, your opening comments today at this very important shadow budget program today.
Thank you. The government has been working proactively to revive and rejuvenate the trade, industry, and economy from difficult times caused by the economic impact of COVID-19. Over the last few months, the government, along with RBI, has announced various bold monetary and fiscal measures in a calibrated manner to support the robust resumption of the lost economic activity. On back of these reforms, the economy has exhibited early signs of recovery in the recent months. However, to sustain this momentum, the economy needs further bold measures and the industry needs continuous hand-holding going ahead. At this juncture, focus is required on enhancing ease of doing business in the country. Ease of doing business is crucial for the overall growth and development of trade and industry, as it attracts foreign investments and provides a considerable boost to the domestic businesses. In the post-COVID scenario, there would be noticeable changes in the global supply chains, and India should focus on capturing a significant share in the world economic system. At this juncture, to attract various foreign companies in India, there is a need to sustain the momentum of implementing reforms both at the center and state levels to make India one of the best destinations to do business. Over the years, India has been continuously improving in World Bank's ease of doing business rankings. For further enhancing ease of doing business, I would like to suggest the following. Reduce the number of government departments which an industry has to deal with from the present 30-40 to less than 5 for removing excessive paperwork and procedures and ensuring transparency in the smooth functioning of the economy. There should be a simple one-page application form for registration. Permission should be granted in 5 working days or deemed to be granted. Single window service. Single window service should be set up to give clearance for all the permissions to ensure faster and efficient action and decision making, along with contract enforceability and other legal reforms, flexible labor laws, and reforms like digitalizing land records and giving land for long-term lease. Inspector Raj must end. Each of the 30-40 departments which industry has to face as an inspector plus enforcement team. We suggest that inspection of industries should only be conducted by giving 15 days advance notice by speed post or email with purpose of visit. After inspection, if any defects are found, the establishment should be permitted to rectify the same. The visit and notice should be authorized in writing by commissioner or deputy commissioner level officer only. The attitude of officials, bureaucrats and inspectors should be of enablers and supporters of industry and trade. There should be only a one-time registration of industry and trade. License word may kindly be omitted. Every 3 years, reasonable fees may be levied as deemed appropriate. There should be efficient and speedy justice system. All disputes should be decided within 365 days. All judges' posts, vacancies should be immediately filled. The number of courts and judges should be doubled to ensure timely justice. There should be level playing field. For that, there should be production-linked incentive of 20% to give Indian industry a level playing field with China. China gives industrial land practically at zero cost. Electricity and water charges are very low. Rate of interest on capital and working capital is 1 to 2% only, vis-a-vis 8 to 10% in India. Logistics cost in China is below 2%, whereas in India it is 7 to 10%. Labor productivity is higher in China. In industrial parks, common effluent treatment plants should be maintained by government. As for individual industries, it is a big cost and harassment. To have a level playing field, 20% production-linked incentives should be given to all sectors. Although procedural requirements have been reduced and the communication between government departments has become transparent and hassle-free, however, the cost aspect of some of the parameters still needs to be relaxed further. The government should focus on reducing the cost of doing business, including the cost of capital, cost of power, cost of logistics, cost of land and availability of land, and cost of labor, cost of compliances, etc. Banking sector should transmit the full effect of recent cut in repo rate and lower the lending rates immediately to reduce the cost of capital for businesses. To reduce the cost of capital, we need further reduction in the repo rate to maintain and rejuvenate domestic demand and enhance the competitiveness of producers in the domestic market and exporters in international market. In India, costs associated with getting electricity has reduced significantly over the years. The government has taken many steps to get electricity easier, faster, and cheaper. However, the per unit charges of power are still significantly very high as compared to China and other countries. Cost of land and availability of land. Obtaining land is one of the most important parameters of ease of doing business. The procedure to acquire land should be free from complex and costly procedural bottlenecks. Land reforms such as increase in the lease period and creation of land banks for the use of industry should be focused. Cost of logistics. Over the years, time involved in transportation of goods has significantly reduced. However, the cost of logistics still remains high, thereby leading to increase in the overall cost of doing business. Cost of labor. The cost of labor is one of the most important costs for businesses. It is particularly important for sectors employing large number of workers, such as construction, manufacturing, and other industries having non-automated operations. At this juncture, the government should focus on a skilled and high productivity manpower base to increase the competitiveness of firms in the international and domestic market. The cost of compliances. Due to a number of mandatory regulatory compliances, there is a cascading effect on the overall cost of doing business. Simplification of compliances would help in making the policy environment more industry friendly, allow firms to focus on their core business and keep compliance costs low.
So ease of doing business, of course, needs to be improved. Just about a minute before you can wrap up, sir.
Absolutely. It may be mentioned that the enactment of insolvency and bankruptcy codes at as one of the success stories of Indian economic reforms. At this juncture, crucial juncture, we urge for an expedited insolvency process with enhanced judicial powers to encourage entrepreneurship, business, and more risk-taking. These reforms will help in enhancing ease of doing business in the country, reducing the cost of doing business, attracting the large chunk of foreign investments, boosting industrial activities, and creating tremendous employment opportunities for the growing workforce in India. These reform measures would go a long way to help economy to sooner than later reach its potential growth trajectory. We are confident that if our recommendations are implemented in letter and spirit, India shall positively achieve its target of
Absolutely.
$5 trillion economy by the year 2040.
No, we certainly hope that that goal will be achieved. A quick follow-up question for you, Pradeep Multani, before we let you go, and you can answer it briefly. Since of course you're a doyen in the pharmaceutical space, we've seen, of course, the brilliance of Covaxin. We hope that this Made in India vaccine will be, promoted all over the world and will be purchased by international countries. But just in the pharmaceutical space, what more needs to be done to make India Atmanirbhar and Ayurvedic medicine as well? Because the entire world and India has been turning to Ayurveda, to combat COVID, as per the Ministry of Ayush's recommendations as well. So how do we promote Ayurveda more across the world? And briefly, sir, on what specifically needs to be done to make the pharmaceuticals industry Atmanirbhar, but to make India the global medicines hub?
You see, Indian pharma industry and Ayush industry only needs one thing: ease of doing business. Let the industrialists, let the factory owners focus on doing business, number one. And number two, let there be a complete level playing field. If there is a difference of 20 to 25, 30% between China and India, how does anyone expect us to be world players? All we want is, let's analyze what is China giving to their industry and what we are getting to the Indian industry. We are very, very optimistic and confident we can conquer the world. Just like we are the pharmacy of the world, we can do wonders. If I may talk about the Ayush sector, our Honorable Prime Minister said that how come India's population, while being 4 times the American population, yet we have less than half the cases, and also the death rate is very low. Did the Ayush sector have a major role to play? Because the Ayush sector had bumper sales. The Ayush boosters, the immunity boosters did wonderful sales. And perhaps it needs to be studied that did these Ayush products have a wonderful impact in keeping the death rate low and the number of cases low.
Okay, so that's something to be perhaps a study can be ordered on that one. But thanks indeed for your comments, Pradeep Multani ji. Thank you for joining us with your suggestions, of course, to the Union government and of course to the Finance Ministry. Let's quickly go across now to another very eminent speaker we are proud to have with us today, Dr. Arvind Virmani, renowned economist and chairman, EGROW. Handing the floor over to you, Dr. Virmani, for your expert comments and your expectations and your suggestions, sir, before the Union Budget of 2021. Dr. Virmani, you'll have to unmute yourself, sir.
Yeah. Can you see?
Yes, we can now. Yeah.
You can see the display?
Yes, the presentation. Yeah.
Okay. So the title you can see. Let me straight away get into it because I don't want to use more than the 20 time allotted to me. This is the first post-pandemic budget, and I will give some suggestions, issues. I'll raise 3 issues and give the suggestions related to it. So first, of course, is the declining trend in GDP growth, which has already been pointed out. And in my view, we need policy reforms for accelerating inclusive growth. The second issue is the rise in unemployment due to contagion fears. There's a temporary increase particularly in what I call mass contact services, which needs to be addressed directly with targeted government expenditures and incentives. And the third one, the weaknesses in the poverty, anti-poverty, poverty alleviation, and public health programs, which have been exposed by the pandemic. So the first one is, in some sense, broader and reflects both the past and the present, and the second two issues which have been highlighted. So in the case of the last one, integration and reform of welfare systems, which anyway needed to be done, and governments systems must refocus on public health, education, and R&D. So first, the inclusive growth policy. As everybody knows, SMEs and household enterprises constitute about 80% of employment. There is a key role when we come to the 21st century of startups and modern SMEs in employment generation and export. Critical problem for SMEs is the compliance cost, financial cost, and time. The previous speakers have already talked about EODB, etc. So my suggestion for the budget is to simplify and rationalize both the direct and indirect taxes. This will help efficient import substitution and export of labor-intensive goods. Particularly, this applies to man-made artificial mixed fabrics, where we have a pathetic record in terms of fibers, fabrics, garments. Our strength has been in cotton because our policies, direct and indirect taxes, have been in a way anti mixed fabrics, etc. And this I just mentioned here. I won't go into details. Skill development has been mentioned, but a critical role is played by Apprenticeship Act, because learning by doing is very important in manufacturing. So that needs to be reformed, and ease of regulatory compliance. There are many things which have already been mentioned, so I won't say more on this. Tax reforms, direct tax code. We have a 20th century direct tax code with layers of sections, provisos, which have been added over 60 years. We cannot create 21st century Atmanirbhar startups and SMEs with this ancient code. And several committees and task forces, etc., have given reports, so it's all available for action. And we need a 21st century code which brings up the tax system, the direct tax system, up to local, up to best practice. When we do this, not only will tax buoyancy rise with ease of paying taxes, but in some sense, there's a hesitation in government to lose revenues at this point. And my suggestion is that the cesses and surcharges, if there's hesitation in kind of abolishing them at one go, these can be phased out over time as they feel more confident about this revenue buoyancy. The second part, coming to the indirect taxes, of course, the goods and services tax. Because of the historical legacy of 17 different taxes which were rolled in, the GST, which was put in, a good move, very good move, but was too complex. And since then, we've been trying to simplify it. My suggestion is that a uniform 15% rate is needed on more than 75% on goods and services with no cess. So this would facilitate, again, exports of labor-intensive goods through easy refund of GST, make it easier for the tax authorities themselves to monitor leakages, catch evasion, etc., and result in much higher revenue buoyancy. Again, the indirect taxes system, if you leave out excise taxes and oil, has had, again, a pathetic buoyancy with respect to GDP. And major part of that reason is this excessive complexity. Coming to tariff reform, I'll spend a little more time on this because it's intimately connected to Atmanirbhar Bharat, and inclusive growth requires that external reform complement the ongoing domestic reforms. We don't have time. I don't have time to list all the reforms. There have been some excellent reforms since September 2019. But in this area, we need a dualistic trade policy with three goals. The goal one is to reduce dependence on monopolized exports. Previous speaker has already mentioned competitiveness with China and the system they have used. But this is critical for economic, social, and national security because they have used deliberate policies to monopolize many exports. So what do we do? I think the key here is to build, of course, there are a whole range of reforms which have been done, which can be done, but the critical thing as far as tariff reforms is concerned is to build minimum efficient scale. The scale of our production in many categories is too small to compete with China. So the investment subsidy, the product linked incentive scheme is actually a very good scheme and a critical link. But this has to be coordinated with selective, phased, temporary higher tariffs on labor-intensive consumer goods monopolized by China, and very careful phasing in terms of inputs. So basically coordination between the PLI. You know, in the last two budgets, several tariffs have been raised, but what one misses is the logic of creating competitive, higher scale production which can compete with China. So I think some review and readjustment of that has to be done. The second goal, promote employment generating exports. Now, India is missing from global supply chains. 70% of international trade occurs within supply chain, and USA and EU are the two main drivers of GDP growth and export demand across the world. 50% of trade is intra-MNC, that is within, and so the critical role of FDIs and MNC, their supply chains, FDI coming into the country. And most MNCs are again headquarters in USA, EU, UK, Japan. So FTAs with USA, EU, and UK are much more important than, for example, people are stuck on RCEP, for example. I am in complete disagreement with those people who are moaning about not joining RCEP. In my view, it is much more important to have FTAs with USA, EU, UK, where the MNCs and the supply chains which end in these countries really drive export growth. And we need to be part of these supply chains. So what needs to be done? You know, what needs to be done is pretty well known, but it's worth repeating. Simplify the import tariff structure to reduce variability. And I already mentioned textiles, but you know, there are 15 different specific rates in textile imports. And what we need is a single rate. And this gives enormous scope for corruption and goes against genuine exporters who want to build their export capabilities. And the second element of this is that a single uniform rate provides equal effective protection. So in the longer term, this plays a very important role. As I said, there are exceptions related to Goal 1, which I mentioned, where you can temporarily have higher tariffs where it's well coordinated with the PLI initiative, but in the broader and for the rest of the world and to integrate with supply chains, we need more of a single uniform rate and lower rates. And finally, on this issue, agricultural trade. The goal is to diversify agriculture and allied sectors, and the exempt policy must complement the domestic reforms. There's been a lot of discussion of domestic reforms, but the exempt policy needs to complement it if we are going to really diversify agriculture, you know, not just in domestic market, but in the export market. So the basic thing here is that traditionally we made ad hoc changes in quantity restrictions, import tariffs, export duties. Every time there is a shock, there's a weather shock, there's a production shock, even though it's justified in the name of the farmer or the poor consumer, these two categories seldom benefit from these ad hoc changes because they raise the risk of investment in agri supply chains. So you keep doing these arbitrary changes, the agricultural supply chains don't develop. So we need to replace this by these QRs, etc., by an import tariff export duty band structure where prices fluctuate freely within the band, but there are tariffs, automatic tariffs come into play. Now, what will this do outside the tariff band? And what this will do is provide a more stable framework for diversification. Second issue, so that is the first issue. The second issue, pandemic unemployment. I'll just spend 30 seconds to explain what this is. You know, very soon after the lockdown, in as early as July, the unemployment rate, which had tripled in the lockdown, came back to normal. Normal being the same as a year ago. But the labor force participation rate fell by 2 percentage points, a huge fall. What this meant is that many categories of people, for example, urban women, withdrew from the labor force because of fears of contagion.
Dr. Virmani, just quickly interrupting you to just request you to also change the slides as you keep proceeding as well. So the pointers, of course, are there so that the relevant pointers are there on the screen as well. So we're currently on the second slide, so you can keep switching the slides as well, sir.
I'm on the 8th slide. Are you?
No, so you'll have to just shift it on your screen.
Oh gosh, got messed up.
Yeah,
Sorry,
you can
sorry.
move to the 8th slide.
Yeah, something happened. I got okay.
Yes.
So you are
Perfect,
still on
perfect.
the second slide?
No,
Oh,
but
sorry.
we've got a gist. Yeah, you can carry
Uh, sorry. So can you see the slide number 8?
on. Yes. Yeah, slide number 8 is on.
Oh, I wish you had told me.
Which is on
earlier.
pandemic unemployment.
Right. Sorry. Oh, but then you missed half the stuff. Anyway, sorry. Okay, let me continue. So I mentioned the labor force. So parts of the labor force withdrew because they were afraid of contagion, from pandemic, etc. Now, in December, about 1.4% of part of this labor force came back. That means these pandemic fears have suddenly subsided. But what you see is a huge jump in unemployment. So in my analysis suggests that it's basically due to indoor contact services, as I call them, and the goods used in this service. So these will not normalize. Most of the economy, the rest of the economy, in fact, is normalizing, as again the two predecessors who spoke have shown you, and our own research also shows the same thing. But these contact services will recover very slowly. So we need to do something about it. Now, there are two policies I suggest for the budget. One is to accelerate infrastructure and public good projects which are construction intensive. We all know that construction activity generates employment. So focus for the next 6 months or so till the vaccine is propagated very well on construction intensive infrastructure and public goods. And secondly, and this is very important because nobody else has focused on this issue, is to incentivize the installation of virus cleaning filtration systems in indoor areas where contact services are provided. This includes, just to give a few examples, it can include movie theaters, malls, airports, any closed space, marriage halls, etc., to incentivize this, because the research as we know today shows that these are the most dangerous areas for spread of virus, and these are the services which are being slow to recover. So if we can incentivize and people can put in these filters and cleaners, you will get this economy services back online much more quickly. And finally, the third issue, I have a couple of slides on this, and I think I'm taking up a lot of time, but I'll go quickly through it. Welfare problems and reform. Of course, there have been systemic problems in poverty alleviation, like the missing poor. There are some people, we have hundreds of state and central government programs, but we still find that some people are not helped by any program. Second issue, the crisis transfers. The people who were migrants, etc., during a pandemic, hurricane, flood, we need to be able to catch those when they need the help. The maldistribution of transfers. Some people get too much, more than they deserve, others get too little. And finally, the multiple central and state programs, leakages, corruption, etc., we are all familiar with. So what I propose is there are three pillars of my reform process. The first is a welfare stack, which, you heard of the health stack, the fin stack, etc., something like that. A welfare stack which contains all central and state entitlement. The second part is what I call a virtual integrated welfare smart card, VISC, which covers covers all the hungry, poor, and vulnerable sections of society. And the third element of this is what may be called which is a kind of direct cash transfer of the central government subsidies, transfers, etc., which can be called DBT Mobile. And this will include all central poverty alleviation programs and subsidies. By pooling the funds, I think there are enough funds, our earlier calculations show, to cover the bottom 40% of the population, as well as 5% population which goes in and out of this category. And the key point about the mobile is that use the mobile in JAM. The JAM, of course, is well known. It's a good program, but focus on the mobile for delivery and empowerment, for example, of migrant labor, self-employment migrants who are geo-divided. You know, they work in one place, their home is somewhere else. So it will make it much easier for them to get the benefits which they are entitled to. And rural women are isolated. I mean, they for various reasons, social and other, they are not very mobile. Their mobility is limited. So, you know, even a free mobile could be given, which will really empower such women. And I also suggest that if possible, to merge the PMKY into the DCT DBTM by pooling fertilizer subsidy and other subsidies. But that's optional. But given this thing, we will get the additional benefit. The president spoke about demand stimulus. Well, this will have the additional benefit of transferring income from the black money guys who are getting things they don't deserve and saving more into the hands of people who will spend it and increase the demand. The second last slide, the COVID, you know, the research showed very early in the COVID pandemic that there was high concentration of coronavirus in sewers and public bathrooms. Now, so what this means is that if we want to avoid future pandemics, we must modernize the sewage systems to minimize risk of future epidemics, and also control something which, again, this is a point I want to stress because few people are familiar with this, is control environmental entropy. I use this fancy word because research has shown that it is implicated in stunting. Stunting has been in the news recently, but it turns out that people who have this environmental enteropathy cannot absorb nutrition. So the issue, there's a confusion between saying, oh, people are not getting enough nutrition, but it can also be that you get the nutrition, you take it in, but it's not absorbed into your system. So I suggest broadening the Swachh Bharat mission to develop modern sewage systems in all the cities of the country. And finally, the public health system, you know, there are, of course, traditional issues which have to be addressed in traditional ways, and one has talked about those. But I think what the pandemic has shown is that the government system, the primary health, the secondary health systems, which are already there in every state, need to be reoriented towards more efficiency on the contagious diseases, the spread monitoring and control systems. Secondly, education. I think by all accounts, the Prime Minister personally, by recommending masks, etc., has done a good job. But the education in schools, etc., must make people aware, so that the next time pandemics occur or epidemics occur, people are familiar with things like viruses, how they spread, etc. So education of the public. And finally, of course, R&D, which on contagious diseases, waterborne diseases, etc., which everybody agrees on. But I think it's important to emphasize because it tends to fall between the cracks. So to conclude,
and in fact, your concluding slide, if I can quickly come in here, Dr. Virmani, will answer one of our viewers and attendees' questions as well to you, which he sent just a short while back. So T.S. Aluwalia, in fact, wanted to know, according to your estimates and you know, your understanding, what would be the contraction in GDP, fiscal deficit, renewed deficit, and taking all this estimation into consideration, what kind of growth could one expect in the year ahead?
So let me answer the fiscal different because, okay. So if the reforms which are in process, I mentioned, I don't have time to go into them. There were 7 or 8 reforms, major reforms since September 2019. And given the reforms suggested, this is what I expect. Of course, just for the record, the current year, we had said would be between minus 7.5% to 0%. And then with downward bias at some point, we said, and I still expect, despite what the advance estimate is, I still expect it to be better than minus 7.5%, the GDP for this year. For next year, I'm on record as predicting double-digit growth, and this is because of the rebound. Say 10% plus minus 1%, 9 to 11%. Now, a lot of people will, when things rebound quickly, they'll all say, oh, base effects. But, if you're a good forecaster, you know what base effects are. You should know what the base is before making predictions. So it's kind of will become obvious to everybody that there's going to be a huge rebound next year. But the key point of the question, which you mentioned, is that if the reform agenda is implemented, I believe that we can go back to the growth rate of between 7% and 8%. There was a point at which we achieved close to 8%, but the global environment is much more adverse, or will be at least for 2, 3, 4 years, all across the world, for many reasons. Again, we don't have time to do it, but despite that, if we continue with the reforms which are underway and which are suggested, then I think we can attain a growth rate of at least 7% for the next decade. Now, the question on fiscal, you might think I've not addressed it, but I have a very different attitude to, and this is based on our research. This is not just an arbitrary point. From the beginning of the pandemic, I have insisted that we must follow a bottom-up approach to fiscal, which is clear targeting, and not this top-down approach, which was popular in the press, international press, domestic press. Oh, you should have 5% stimulus, 10% stimulus, 15%. I think that's not correct, and it's not going to be correct for at least the next 6 months. So I favor a targeted approach, a plan which identifies what are the things which can be done efficiently. It's easy to say that push up infrastructure growth by 100%, but we don't have the capability. So building from the bottom down, what are the specific things? I have given some specific things. I'm sure many others have given specific things which can be done efficiently and productively. Then I don't care what the fiscal deficit is. If you give me a plan which says I'm addressing this problem, this is the best way to do it, I have to spend this amount of money in the next year, absolutely fine. I don't care whether the deficit is 5% or 7.5% or 10%. To me, at least for the next 6 months and possibly for the next 12 months, that is not the key. But the efficiency is very important, because that will sustain the growth which I'm talking about here.
Okay, well, let's wrap it up there. Dr. Arvind Virmani, thank you very much for joining us with a very holistic view of the current economic climate, your suggestions, widespread recommendations, and let's certainly hope that they're followed by, of course, the powers that be. But thanks for also giving us a realistic sense of what the fiscal deficit will look like in the months ahead, and also a realistic and pragmatic growth rate as well, because we've been seeing all sorts of wide speculations and far-fetched speculations, even from international agencies. So good to get a realistic, pragmatic view from you. Okay, let's move on. Very quickly, let's move on to Dr. Charan Singh, a renowned economist and chief executive for IGRO, who's also with us. Dr. Charan Singh is also joining us virtually. So Dr. Charan Singh, okay, we seem to have just lost Dr. Charan Singh's connection there. So what I'm going to do at this point is, I'm going to quickly lead in to the slides of our partners and sponsors. If we can quickly just play that out on our screen. Okay, we will be playing that out in due course. For now, let's take a very short break. The first break of our program today. We've got some power-packed speakers still lined up for you. We're going to be delving straight into some very core sectors like agriculture, like defense, like, of course, manufacturing, all of that after this very short break. Don't go anywhere. Yeah, continue. After the PhD. Yeah, I think we are trying to react. Let's get it done quickly. We lose our TV audience otherwise. If we take too many ads. Should we just let's just start. So as soon as you have your slide, please let me know and I'll toss it. Come. Dr. Charan Singh, someone needs to get Dr. Charan Singh back. Dr. Charan Singh ji, if you're able to hear me, please do come back in the frame, sir.
Hello.
Yes, I'm coming to. Are you ready? हेलो हाँ हेलो हाँ हाँ बस एक मैं दीपक के साथ हूँ लाइन पे 1 मिनट में आता हूँ। हेलो रेडी आप लोग रेडी या दीपक बता दो फटाफट आप मुझे क्यों कर दो इसी पे मुझे क्यों मत करो आप मुझे 10 से 5 बोल दो और 5 सेकंड्स अनुमान लगा के बताओ हाँ बताओ काउंटडाउन दे दो दिनेश आप और दीपक कौन कॉल पे हो हेलो आप दोनों कौन कॉल पे हो कौन बोलेगा हाँ दीपक आप बोलो काउंटडाउन दो Welcome back from the break. I'm Uday Pratap Singh. You're still watching this special show on NewsX. It's, of course, a special program on the shadow budget 2021-22, organized by PhD CCI in partnership with EGRO, which you're seeing right here live on NewsX. We are, of course, building up to the union budget of 2021, which, remember, is a much awaited budget, as I've just said. We're getting, of course, our panelists to give their recommendations, their expectations from the finance minister. What should be the thrust areas? Without further ado, I want to go straight across to my next speaker on the broadcast. We have Dr. Charan Singh with us, who's, of course, a renowned economist and chief executive for EGRO. Dr. Charan Singh, the floor is yours. What are your suggestions, sir?
I'll be very brief. I would say the presentations made by the predecessors and our chairman are in front of you, and I want to go straight to the subject that's very important to me. I think in the days to come, non-banking finance companies will play a very prominent role. The non-banking finance companies play an important role at the last mile, given that we have a very good regulator, we have highly regulated commercial banks. The NBFCs are the weak link there. And I think the government has to do something to strengthen the non-banking finance companies. 50 years back, commercial banks were not that strong. The government of India had started an institution called the National Institute of Bank Management. And for the cooperative banks, had started another institution, College for Agriculture Banking. So I think the government will have to step in this time to strengthen the non-banking finance companies. They should institute a national level institution for good quality research, as well as train people for the NBFC sector. So I think budget is just not a statement of accounts. It's a policy statement of the government for things to come in the next 1 year or next few years. And I think that is something very important that requires to be done. As has been already mentioned repeatedly, I also agree that the government need not worry too much about the fiscal deficit. It can go beyond the limit, as has advanced countries gone. But where will the money come from? I think a time has come to monetize the deficit. To monetize the deficit, you borrow from the Reserve Bank. Now, the issue is that in our country, debt and monetary management is done both by the Reserve Bank. I think it will be in the interest of the national authorities, both the fiscal and the Reserve Bank monetary authority, if debt management is taken out of the Reserve Bank. By virtue of doing that, the Reserve Bank will focus on the interest rate, and the fiscal policy does on the taxes and expenditure. And of course, the debt management will focus on optimization of the cost of borrowing. So I would recommend that. How do we kickstart the economy? That's very important. And of course, various thoughts have been expressed. I think one of the thoughts is, and the government did try telling the salaried people to go on LTC. So somehow when you go on LTC, you start the tourism sector, there's a travel, there's air travel, there are taxis which are engaged, there are hospitality sector which is engaged. I'm making a suggestion this time. What do we do with the pensioners? Maybe the ones who are in service are not willing to go. Pensioners, elderly who have been locked down, they would be willing to go. So if the government could allow the pensioners to take an LTC and avail this benefit, that'll probably put in some demand and revive the economy. I also have a thought that there can be these fiscal issues which keep coming up again and again. And as a policy statement, the government may consider a permanent fiscal institution for our country. It is there in many other countries. Even in the monetary policy, we have a monetary policy committee which comes up. So the government could think at the least a fiscal policy committee, and also at the larger end, like the monetary authority, a fiscal policy institution that can take care of various disputes that will keep coming up as times change. It could be GST, it could be the issue of MSP, it could be the issue of any other thing which has an implication on the taxes. Now, one more thought which I have is that in our country, to pump in demand, people are living in houses. And these houses, elderly population, sometimes may not have the cash flow. So therefore, we can ensure reverse mortgage, whereby the elderly who are living in the houses, there is a flow of money that comes to them, and that will give them some demand in the hands and kickstart the economy. The last issue that I want to place, everybody speaks about the health sector. The government has also done a lot. They have been setting up all India medical institutions across the country. I think after the COVID and the lockdown, we have to start thinking in terms of mental health. That aspect has not been properly addressed to. So I would say that in the policy statement, the government should now address the mental health issues. And therein, I think various people will have to play a role. The Niti Aayog has to play a role in how to ensure that post-COVID, with rising unemployment, increased poverty, how are we going to address the anxiety, the depression, and sometimes the suicidal tendencies. Those would be my recommendations in the budget as a policy statement. Thank you.
Just a quick follow-up question then, Dr. Charan Singh, which has also been asked by one of our viewers and attendees, which takes off from that last point you just raised. What specific measures then are needed to, of course, look at increasing the GDP, but also specifically focus, Dr. Singh, on creating employment, on tackling unemployment, on creating employment, creating jobs?
So I think that's obvious. There are infrastructure and housing. They have backward forward linkages with about 275 industries. They need to be encouraged. They're labor intensive. They need to be encouraged. Tourism and hospitality has to be encouraged because that's where the employment is with minimum capital investment. So those are the two sectors, and all my suggestions are targeting those. The last one which I'm saying is that there's going to be huge crowding out. The Permanent Fiscal Commission, there's going to be huge crowd out. And therefore, to take care of the crowd out, interest rates should be brought down, and the Permanent Fiscal Commission should be able to give those suggestions.
If there was one sector which you believe should be the thrust sector of the government in this budget, which would that be?
There'll be MSMEs and the non-banking finance companies. We need to ensure that there's synergy between the two and one encourages the other. That's why I'm suggesting that for NBFCs, we need an institution, and for the MSMEs, there has to be lower interest rate.
Okay. Dr. Charan Singh, also, to create, of course, a sort of manufacturing hub in India, to boost, of course, companies and countries coming to collaborate with us. As I said earlier in my opening comments, the fact that there is this anti-China climate now in the world. How do we tap into this to create, of course, a great playing field for international MNCs and for countries to come and collaborate and invest in India?
We need to replicate what China is doing. How did China attract from 0 foreign industries to 9,75,000 industries when COVID started? Free land, least low-cost capital, building sheds, arranging staff, and last minute, everything is just-in-time delivery. What China did. I think we have virgin areas in Northeast. We have mining areas in Orissa and Jharkhand. We have a beautiful coastal line in some of the states. We have manufacturing states in Gujarat and Maharashtra. We have everything. So we need to just do better than what China does. And we are a democracy, they're autocratic, and still they get all the foreign investment. The second thing we need to ensure is that our high commissions And our embassies outside, they need to play a much bigger role and tell the world India is a great destination. Please go there. They are good speaking in English. They are computer literate. People are very civilized. They are very, very tolerant. We are a multicultural society. They need to play a very important role. Our embassies. And the third, the trade associations like the PhD chamber and other trade associations should spread the word across the world that this is a place which is a great destination for industry.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Dr. Charan Singh, for joining us today and with your comments and recommendations. Let me quickly move straight across now to Shri Sandeep Agarwal, who's also with us today at the PhD Chamber of Commerce and Industry office and national headquarters here in Delhi. Shri Sandeep Agarwal, of course, is Chairman, Industry Affairs Committee, PhD CCI. He will outline to us what his recommendations are and generally the sense of what industry wants from this budget. Over to you.
Hello, friends. Basically, I'm looking at the industry and also telecom. So I will be talking about the two. So what is happening is that the Indian manufacturing industry over a period of time has reduced. Now, there was a time when there was before the British came in, the Indian manufacturing was probably bigger than the British manufacturing, and the cloth manufacturing and the products which were manufactured in just the Bengal Suba was more than the pre-industrialized European manufacture. So, but we have lost all of that, and we have lost all of that first to Europe, then to America, and now to China. We need not do that. We have to get back our manufacturing prowess. We need the 25% benchmark, that we should be 25% of our GDP should be from manufacturing. And as our telecom minister also says, that on the telecom side, we should be at least 20% of the GDP. That it should come from the IT and IT enabled services and telecom side. So what we basically need to do today is that we need to depend now on the Indian manufacturing prowess, the make in India. We should be vocal for local. We cannot let our products being manufactured in China or US or Japan. The reason being that today they are our friends, but tomorrow, as between US and China or India and China, we are not so good friends. What is going to happen? They will snoop on us, they will take our data, and they are going to use it against us. China, we are forced to have their telecom equipment in Arunachal Pradesh. They don't even call it India. That is very sad. So we need to put in what the government has done is to address that is very good. The productivity linked incentive scheme, 1.46 lakh crores worth of scheme which has come up. In the next 5 years, the government wants the Indian industry to really develop and produce more. And the government is going to give this 1.46 lakh crores as incentive to the industry. Now, what we want is that this scheme is properly tuned, that for MSME sector and for the Indian owned companies, it may not be necessary that there's some specific issues which are like investment. So you have to put in investment first to sell. But if you have already invested and you are working at 40-50% capacity today, like in the telecom sector, it should be allowed to actually just have the sales. So if we are able to increase our turnover, if we become globally competitive, that is what we will be requiring. We have to invest in research and development. Yes, the industry does it, but research and development comes normally how? In US, in the California, the government gave money to the industry to develop products for defense, for aerospace, for anything which they thought that you could develop in technology. Not millions, but billions of dollars government gave as subsidy to the industry. Now, that is how industry will put in their brains, industry is going to put in their time, but the money to develop and to do R&D usually comes from the government, as it does in China, Japan, US, or any other country in the past history we see. So we need to understand that that is where I think there is a lapse. That is where the government is still not saying that we are going to put in our money in. Then on the high technology front, like the computer wafers, chips. Now we need to develop those chips. There's maybe a 3 billion investment there. But then you are importing maybe 10 billion or 15 billion worth of chips and the cards and the mobile phones, maybe 50 billion worth of mobile phones. So if we have our own chip manufacturing plant, the country is going to actually save a lot of foreign exchange, and we are going to develop the whole infrastructure around it. We have the technology. The Indian designers make the design for the chips in India. They do etching on it sometimes. They have everything except the physical infrastructure of the plant. Once we have that, India is going to be the leader in manufacturing. So then the government has come out with the 1,11,000 crores, lakh crores NIP, National Investment Pipeline. And as soon as it came, the COVID struck. But we do hope and do pray the government is actually would intensify this investment, because if that is done, then the country is going to really reap the benefits. And what happens when there is a problem? Whenever there is a fall of manufacturing, like whenever there was a famine, the buildings used to be built by the kings. So that is how, whenever now we are in a problem, so the government needs to invest money. So yeah, there are many points we can all discuss.
You have about a minute to go.
Okay,
and you can, of course, so you made an important point about government spending, which obviously needs to be increased. Perhaps that will also stir consumer sentiment, because demand needs to be created, as the president had mentioned earlier.
The one district, one product scheme of the government is quite good. And all the states, including Uttar Pradesh and others, are working on it. We do hope and believe that the investments and the hand-holding which is required is the most difficult part. So that they are able to do. Now we also want to specifically talk about one of the sector, telecom, in which BSNL is being used preferably for the development of the telecom infrastructure of the country.
Yes.
The BSNL has been told very correctly that you will buy only Indian products, Indian manufactured products. So that means that BSNL is going to invest maybe 20,000 crore rupees into buying from the Indian manufacturers. But the Indian manufacturers have never been bought from. So we do have the technology, we do have the product, but we do not have the capacity right now to obviously to convert that into the carrier level infrastructure, which is going to take some time. Now, for that, the companies which put in their money where their mouth is, like BSNL or even other people, they should be getting the money from the government, the funds from the government to cover their losses. That is very important. And also,
and of course, you would welcome then the Supreme Court moratorium as well on those AGR dues.
Yes, exactly. And also, I really am thankful to the government that they have put in companies like CSC. They are really doing a human service, because all the MSMEs are involved, all the VLEs, the people who are actually working, 1.5 lakh VLEs are all MSMEs, and they are putting in the infrastructure to develop the optical fiber network of the country. So that we really commend our minister and prime minister on that.
Sandeep ji, I will interject there. We leave it at that. Thank you very much. for joining us with your comments and of course your recommendations, particularly as you said on the telecom sector, but also covering other sectors as well. Dr. Ashok Vishendas is also with us today. Dr. Vishendas, of course, is Director EGRO and former Chairman, CACP, Commission for Agricultural Costs and Prices. Dr. Vishendas, over to you for your comments and recommendations. And then I have one specific question for you as well.
Thank you very much. Hello, friends. See, gold is gold when it is sold. What farmers produce is no less precious than the gold. On one hand, our agriculture policy during last 70 years has been successful in the sense that we have turned the country from net food importing country to self-sufficiency and then to net food exporting country. On the other hand, farmers' income have not increased commensurately. Obviously, something is missing. What is that? See, agriculture has been now currently it contributes about 14.6% to our GDP, which is low, but that's not a question of discussion. What is that? See, the 5 trillion economy which we dream of, agriculture has a lot of potential to contribute to. My co-panelist just said that there has to be demand generated. Where the demand comes from? It comes from the bottom. So, let me give an analogy before I come to the 7 specific suggestions for the agriculture sector. When you launch a rocket, it has to be fired from the bottom, not from the top. What we did, we started the reforms only from the service sector, then to manufacturing, and agriculture was, it bypassed the 90s reform. Now this is the time, it's never too late, and we have to start, and I'm sure this will give and spur the demand of whether manufacturing or any sector, the service sector. And that's the overall philosophy, and that is established by my own research. Now, the country will be immensely benefited if the Honorable Finance Minister makes the following 7 steps. One is we have to have a stable agriculture trade policy. We currently have only 37 billion US dollars worth of our agriculture export, though we command the first 10 position in the export of agriculture sector, but it can be increased to $100 billion in few years, and that is the way. And what we do, the country gives the very unstable trade policy just for a short-term supply bottlenecks. We give the export ban, then put the minimum export price, and so on and so forth. This is not, and not only that, most of you are businessmen, and if you default in your commitment to international player or international businessmen, you will lose the face. Now, farmers, for example, onion is a case in point. Now, when they commit to the international buyer, and then suddenly government puts a full stop, what face? Now, nobody will believe our Indian farmers, the agri exporter. So this is not just one-off affair that temporarily the price is rising. Now, why government cannot assure the farmer, whatever be the case, we will allow you. So the stability in the agriculture trade policy is a must, because no country can have a very commanding kind of economy unless it exports. And that is the way where we can increase our welfare of our farmers and the agriculture sector. And that gives a lot of demand to the secondary and tertiary sector. That means manufacturing and services. That is the point 1. Now, if we see, most of us must have traveled to Sikkim, to Goa, to northeastern Uttarakhand. There is immense scope and demand also for organic products. Many people are very health conscious and they can afford, because our income is rising, per capita income is rising, not only of India, but all. So people can afford the organic product, and there is a global demand worth about 90 billion US dollar for the organic product, and we command just 0.6% of that. Although we have a very our environment and the soil condition favor for this. Therefore, it's not a farmer's fault, but country's policy is such that we are not able to export the organic product. For this, 2 things are to be done. You have to have a very, very strong airports and ports. That is one. And we have to create, which looks very small, but to me, it's very important. We have to create agriculture economist position in the embassies. Because I have traveled many countries before this, and then talked to the Spain, Saudi, South, and many other countries. Why to name one? There is a great demand for Indian organic product, but there's nobody to propagate. So Indian embassy should have, that's my suggestion to the finance minister, to create position of agri-economist in the Indian embassy and consulate. That's the point number 2. Point 3 is we have to create an enabling policy environment. For instance, now we have to optimize the land. Land is very, very precious resource, and the farmers are not fully utilizing. Now, how it can be better utilized? See, when they grow some crop, either Rabi or Kharif, then there is a scope in between to plant trees, that is solar trees, which can be put, and some parts, very in small pockets in Gujarat, I have seen they have done it. On 10 to 12 feet, they put the solar tree, and it is put in such a manner that photosynthesis can take place, because it will not block the sunlight, and even tractor can move in between.
Right.
So about 500 trees can be planted in 1 acre, and then the government can have the hand holding of the farmers to have some kind of agreement with the farmers and the electricity board to buy, and that will have a clean energy.
Okay.
And solar, we are a very potential strong contender for leader in the solar and clean energy and green energy. And next point is, we have
just briefly, sir, because we have about a minute to go, and then I have a question for you.
Yeah, okay, then I will skip few points. Now, digitization of land records is very important. We have not done it. Started in 2008 because the large number of farmers, they are not able to sell on minimum support price, which is recently talked a lot, and then about 30% of such farmers, they are kept out of the net of the MSP. And final point. Now, there is a lot of vociferous demand from farmers to fix the MSP on A2 plus FL and C2. The difference between two is, as of now, they do the A2 plus FL, but the short point is C2 adds the farmers, if they have farmer own capital and own land, you have to have imputed value of your own land and imputed value of the interest of your own capital. No business can allow that to be added as a cost, because that gets rewarded in the, so government should not fall into that kind of trap. And if it is done, if I'm afraid it can be done, but if it is done, our agriculture will be destroyed, and because the imported agriculture product will be much cheaper, and then this becomes very, very harmful.
Well, very holistic view that you've given us, and you've outlisted a lot of steps which are needed to boost this agricultural sector and, of course, increase farmers' income. And perhaps there will be some announcements for the agriculture sector, considering the entire narrative right now about farmers. We saw, of course, some announcements by the Prime Minister as well last month. But specifically on this logjam, sir, that is currently on. And now, of course, the Supreme Court has stayed the laws. It's formed a committee. Today, we've just heard that the 9th round of talks has concluded inconclusively, once again, between the government and the farmers' unions. What is a possible solution, in your opinion, to the logjam?
Well, I think I can only say, if a person is sleeping, you can awake them. But if he is not sleeping but pretend to sleep, God can only help. So that's my. But let's just give me half a minute. See, there are. Now, I am tempted to give the example of the Prime Minister of Canada. When India, our Commerce Minister, Shri Piyush Goyal, defends the farmer in the WTO, World Trade Organization, to give the minimum support price, they oppose. And when the agitation of farmer, none other than the Prime Minister of Canada himself said that you listen to the farmers. Now, see, it's a contradiction. Now, what else you need evidence?
So you believe vested voices have hijacked?
You got a point very correct.
Okay. Thank you so much, Dr. Ashok Visandas, for joining us today and sharing your, of course, views and very topical opinion, of course, also on the agricultural issues. Dr. Ratan Chand is also with us now. I'll go straight across. Do we have Dr. Ratan Chand with us? Okay, no, we will just try. Yeah, there, Dr. Ratan Chand is with us now. Dr. Chand is Director, EGROW, and former Chief Director, Monitoring and Evaluation, Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, Government of India. Again, very topical to have Ratanji with us because, of course, he has been closely working with the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, who, remember, has been the nodal agency during this pandemic and, of course, now will remain even in the vaccination era. So, Dr. Ratan Chand, over to you, sir. Your recommendations, your expectations.
Okay, good evening. I have few points to make. Some of these are more of a sort of nature of policy prescriptions. First point is shift focus from curative to preventive and promotive services. So, all of us know that health is a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. 70% of the global deaths are due to non-communicable diseases, and 80% of the chronic diseases can be prevented by adopting healthy lifestyles. That is, regular physical activity, proper nutrition, no smoking, and no excessive drinking of alcohol. The healthcare services need to focus more on prevention of communicable diseases and non-communicable diseases. Currently, more focus is on curative services, which are more costly compared to the prevention and promotion. Then, related to this is from the early age, we should start health education from schools, and this should continue to throughout the life cycle of an individual. Second point is reorient medical education. The Indian system of medicine is more focused on healthy living and disease prevention. But unfortunately, this has been neglected due to political or other reasons, and it is seen inferior to allopathic system. There is a need to correct this bias, and efforts to mainstream ISM, Indian system of medicine, need to be further strengthened. And my suggestion is develop curriculum for an integrated graduate level medical course incorporating good aspects from the disciplines of allopathy and Indian system of medicine, including naturopathy and yoga. Make this curriculum compulsory for medical graduates of any discipline. Continue this integration in the postgraduate curriculum also. This would strengthen health system and reduce rivalry between the various systems like allopathy, Ayurvedic, and Unani, Siddha, etc. Next point is improve program management. Absence of professionally qualified and trained cadre of public health professional is seen all over. Clinical doctors on promotion are positioned as block or district or state health services officer to man the administrative and logistic functions, which they find it difficult to cope with. There is a need to have all India level of public health cadre like IAS or PCS to efficiently manage the health systems. At present, only few states have public health cadres. Next point is increase government spending on health. Lack of funds should not come in the way of strengthening research and development, medical education, infrastructure, manpower, and logistic requirements. Private practitioners may also be roped in to provide health services wherever required. Next point is reduce out-of-pocket expenditure on health. Every year, approximately more than 150 million individuals throughout the world face high health expenditure, and more than 100 million individuals are pushed into the poverty by the need to pay for health services. People have to cut down on the necessities such as food and clothing, or are unable to pay for their children's education. Next point is reduce hospitalization expenditure. Now, the government has launched the Pradhan Mantri Jan Arogya Yojana to take care of hospitalization expenses by covering approximately 50 crore rural and urban and rural poor. This scheme covers medical and hospitalization expenses for almost all secondary and tertiary care procedures. Now, to make this scheme successful, it is to be ensured that speedy approvals for hospitalization and timely payment to the empaneled public and private hospitals is made. And regulated for those who are not covered under this scheme, the hospital rates need to be regulated by the government. And there should also be a system to periodically include the left out families. This should not be a one-point program to include families in the list of people who can be given benefit under this scheme. Periodically, people who are left out or who become eligible because of some reason should be included in this program. Then reduce OPD expenditures, because for reducing out-of-pocket expenditure, one is hospitalization, another is OPD expenditure, under which people have to get medicines and they have to show they need to have consultation with doctors. So for doing this, there is need to efficiently govern the existing health facilities like sub-centers, primary health centers, community health centers, district hospitals. For this, the availability of doctors, staff, and medicines has to be there. The government has to develop a trust among the community in the public health system. Because if someone is traveling 2-3 kilometers or 5 kilometers and going to the hospital, and he finds that hospital is closed, or he doesn't get consultation,
yes,
and doesn't get medicine, then he lose faith in the public health system.
You're about 30 seconds to go, sir, before you wrap up.
Okay, establish more facilities to cut travel time and cost, regulate prices of the drugs, and open more Jan Aushadhi Kendras, and also on the pattern of Jan Aushadhi Kendra, open diagnostic Kendras also. Last point is, there is need to have an efficient monitoring and surveillance system to have online data so that corrective measures can be taken as soon as possible. Thank you very much.
And do you believe, before we wrap up, Dr. Ratan Chand, that at the end of the day, the spending on health must go up, that the proportion of the amount we allocate towards the health sector will go up in this budget, given what we've seen in the last year?
Yeah, I believe that spending, if required, spending on the specified items, those schemes should be identified first, and if required, then lack of funds should not come in the way. But for just providing funds just like that without any proper schemes
so there needs to be
will not be beneficial.
There needs to be accountability, no doubt. Okay, thank you very much, Ratan ji, for joining us with your perspective and, of course, your suggestions and recommendations today. Last but not the least, we are moving now towards Colonel MP Singh. Colonel MP Singh, of course, is a PhD and also a defense analyst. Colonel MP Singh, your suggestions, your recommendations. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I would like to start with saying that to guard a 5 trillion economy, physically and economically, we need to have a commensurate defense budget. A well-equipped and a modern defense forces not only give us security, but they also give us a strategic advantage in the region. So coming with that, 2021, we had a defense budget of 4,71,000 rupees, which included salaries for 1.4 million armed forces, which included pensions for 3.1 million pensioners, which included production, which included maintenance, R&D, and modernization. All in all, it was 2.1% of the GDP. A trend which was seen in last 10 years was the reduction on our spending. In 2010, we had a defense budget of 2.7% of GDP, and in 2020, we came down to 2.1. So the point to ponder. In 2018, the Cabinet Committee on Defense opined that we need to increase our spendings because there is gross acute shortage of vital equipment, and they opined that it should be pegged around 3% of the GDP. The alarming trend, another one, was that in the allocation in the defense budget, the increase was in terms of revenue, expenditure, and the commensurate decrease in terms of capital. And we all know capital expenditure is the one which goes through for the modernization of and buying of the new equipment. The next point I would like to also make, considering the geopolitical situation in that area, the prevailing one, and with a 22,500 kilometers of boundary with 15,000 land borders and 7,500 maritime borders, which needs to be guarded 24/7, it's very important to have our modern defense forces to match our adversaries. And the second point is, if we are forced, we could even have a two-front war. So the importance of modernization cannot be denied. It has to be done. I'd just like to give one example that in 1988, the defense budget of India and China was same, $11.5 billion. And come 2020, our defense budget is $66 billion, and China is 3 times the budget at around $180 billion. So that's a point to ponder. So now I'll quickly come to my expectations from this year's budget. I'm sure the Honorable Finance Minister is certainly going to keep these points in mind. And I'm expecting an increase of around 11 to 12% in the defense allocations, anything to the tune of 50 to 60,000 crores of additional allocations compared to the last year. I'm also expecting the reversing of this trend of increase in revenue, expenditure, and a decrease in the capital. There's time to, kind of do away with this and increase our capital expenditure so that we can go in for our modern equipments to equip our forces. I'm also thinking that expecting this budget to kind of give a fillip to Make in India, because as you're all aware that India is almost one of the second largest importers of arms in the world with 9.2% share, which is just second to Saudi Arabia with 12% share. Right, so I think this budget, I'm expecting some boost to Make in India so that we are more self-dependent in terms of.
And just quickly coming in, it's very appropriate that you say this because we've just seen the DRDO come up with that.
Tejas.
Yes, the Tejas orders, of course, but also this new gun, this new weapon, artillery weapons.
Yes, artillery gun, which is coming up. So this is exactly what is happening, but a lot needs to be done more in this. So coming to the suggestions, per se, I've got 5 quick suggestions I'll give. Firstly, I'll talk about all major economies in the world have good, strong defense manufacturing sector, right? So here I feel that private sector needs to be dovetailed. It's high time that we, take them in, and in not only in terms of manufacturing of equipment and clothing, but also in probably in terms of small arms, keeping the strategic arms development with DRDO and the ordnance factories. We can dovetail the private sector into the small arms. Also, one must see that we are about to reach the 5 trillion mark. And the moment we reach 5 trillion mark, that means almost our budget should be touching at a very moderate level, 2.5% of GDP would mean that will be almost $125 billion defense budget. So we have to start planning now. Because most of the important defense purchases, they have at least a lag time of 5 years. They are not available off the shelf. So the time to start now. I'm sure something on this kind, some allocations will be done. Third point I want to make is incorporate private sector into R&D of weapon and equipment. Let R&D, DRDO, PSUs are doing a fantastic job, but it is time that even private sector in the developed economies, we have seen private sector playing an important role in developing new arms and equipment. Along with PSUs, I would also say that the public sector undertakings, probably there could be defense private sector enterprises which can be given a boost, a specific industry called defense private sector enterprises. Next point I would like to say is, as far as the manpower intensive is our army. Now, see, almost 7,000 kilometers of our borders, land borders, are rugged terrain, mountainous terrain, difficult terrain. Guarding these difficult terrains is manpower intensive. So though a lot of people talk of technology being brought in, we cannot do it with the manpower. Hence, keeping the present situation in mind, especially with the China border, I feel that even if there's a requirement of raising an probably a new division, mountain division, that could be thought of. Last point, I would like to bring in the role of ex-servicemen in nation building. Every year, almost 50,000 young soldiers, they retire at the age between 37 to 45. That is no retirement age. They are available to the country to form part of various organizations and things which can use their expertise are ordnance factories, defense PSUs, police forces, paramilitary forces. And here I think that even the private sector can play a very important role by picking up this manpower and utilizing them. They are a disciplined force, physically fit and disciplined. So with these points, I would like to end my
Okay. One concluding then question for you, sir. With the increased possibility of this two-front war and of course a very tense situation along the LAC with China, how do we balance increasing spend on defense, increasing our defense budget obviously to tackle this volatile situation with the current fiscal situation as well because of course the COVID pandemic. We've seen last year cuts in defense spending. We saw certain austerity measures announced by the CDS. So how do we balance, the pragmatic realities of the fiscal situation along with the very volatile situation along both the borders?
Yeah, a very good point. I feel that balancing this is required and it will come in the moment we go in to make in India. The prices on which the product is bought from a foreign country, I would say if we make the same product in our own country, it will be probably half of it. And there lies our savings, which we can use in further in different sectors.
Fantastic, sir. Very, very valid point to sum it up. Well, that concludes all of our speeches for today. I hope you enjoyed watching this special showcase. Before I hand over for a final vote of thanks to the Secretary General of PhD CCI, we do have, I think, a slide to quickly thank our partners and acknowledge our friends. Lay that out. Okay, now let me go straight across to Shri Saurabh Sanyal, Secretary General of PhD CCI, for a vote of thanks to conclude today's program.
Thank you, Uday. Good evening, viewers. Good evening, distinguished panelists and our participants, our members from the PhD Chamber of Commerce and Industry. I'm sure each one of you would have enjoyed the shadow budget today, which was held exclusively to inform the Government of India and the state governments on the wish list of the industry and the economists. We are extremely grateful to IGRO for having partnered with us, and also the NewsX channel, the TV premier channel of the country, for having moderated and produced this show for PhD Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Really thankful to the entire team, including Uday, who has moderated it very well. I am extremely thankful to Dr. Arvind Virmani, the renowned economist and chairman of the IGRO, for having spared his valuable time. Dr. Charan Singh, the chief executive of IGRO. Dr. Vishan Das, for giving director IGRO and former chairman CACP, and Dr. Ratan Chand, director IGRO and former chief Director, Monitoring and Evaluation, Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, Government of India, and Colonel MP Singh for having given his valuable inputs on the defense. Friends, this is just the beginning. We laud the government's efforts in COVID-19, all the possible measures and the phenomenal provisions made for the industry to spring back the economy in COVID times. We further request the Government of India, the Honorable Prime Minister and the Honorable Minister of Finance and the Honorable Minister of Commerce to take this forward in the pre-COVID as well as post-COVID era. The vaccination is going to come up from tomorrow. I would also like to thank the viewers and the participants for having lent their ears and thoughts. And now we can have, we did not have any questions other than the moderator asking a few questions. So we are running short of time. So last but not the least, today is the Armed Forces Day, and we ended with a note of a very good note on the defense budget, which was given by Colonel MP Singh. I wish to thank all the serving and retired veterans of the country who have guarded their borders from time immemorial, even during the tough times of COVID-19. We thank you, each one of you who has been a part and parcel of the shadow budget. With these words, I conclude. Thank you and Jai Hind.
Thank you very much for that, Shri Sanyal. And, it has been a truly holistic view, as I promised our viewers at the start of this session, touching upon all the varied sectors of our economy, which all need to be the focus areas of this very important budget. This is PhD CCI's wish list. This is IGRO's wish list. These are their recommendations, which of course will now be sent, have already been sent through our broadcast to the powers that be, over to now the Finance Ministry, of course, and other taskmasters for the budget. All eyes will be on the 1st of February. You can watch it, of course, with us at NewsX. We promise to have a host of these speakers analyzing it for you. But I just want to conclude by saying that India's victory is ours. If the economy succeeds, we all succeed. So we need to be part of this one team. It's no team A, team B, team C. It's one team. We are Team India. Let's work for Team India's success story. It's been an unprecedented year, a very difficult year, but it's time now to look forward. And that's what we were attempted to do today at NewsX, and that's what we're attempting to do every day on the channel. So stay tuned, of course, to NewsX, and thank you once again to PhD CCI and IGRO for organizing this today. Thanks to our viewers as well for watching. Goodbye for now. Thank you so much. Just one second. Just if you all can just sit, we have to just record the introduction once again. My introduction, because there was a bit of